Good. Okay, we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Talking Tennis. This is ATP Weekly, hosted by myself, Vanch, and joining me, we have a special guest from the tennis tribe. It is Hanlon Walsh of the Doubles Only podcast. So, how are you doing, Hanlon?
I'm doing well. How about you? Still recovering from Atlanta.
Yeah, some really good tennis, and it was played in Atlanta, and a nice storyline in the singles, of course, with Taylor Fritz winning the title, his sixth career ATP title. But I'm curious, since you were on the grounds yourself, what's something that really stood out to you about the event?
Yeah, I got there on Saturday, so I was there for both semifinals, singles and doubles, and then stayed through the finals yesterday. And I think Taylor Fritz, obviously for American fans, was the best story of the tournament. Him just winning a tournament he was supposed to. I think any result besides the championship trophy for him being a top 10 player to 250 in his home country would have been a disappointment. So was happy to see him get the title. But I think Alexander Vukic was really one of the feel good stories of the tournament. I think you could see the Atlanta crowd really draw to him. And as they learn more about his story throughout the week, he had such a good run and had, big wins over Eubanks and then Ugo Humbert, and then it came up short, against Fritz in the finals, but I think, had a career best week. So I would say that was one of certainly the feel good stories of the event as well.
Yeah. Always nice when you have one of those mid-career breakthrough moments, especially if you've been at the challenger level for a good 4 or 5 years. I believe he also played 4 years in Illinois in college tennis as well. So it's nice to see some of those players being rewarded, just as Chris Eubanks, of course, was with Mallorca and the run in Wimbledon. And how would you say was sort of the crowd reception and reaction towards Eubanks, especially now that he's much more high profile, and of course this was his home event.
So actually, I was disappointed to miss Eubanks. I got there Saturday and he lost the night before I got there, but I would expect, and from what I saw on TV, like being a Georgia Tech alum and just, growing up in Georgia, I think it was, the stands were very full. The crowds were energized by him. I know even from a media perspective, some of the other journalists who were there on the weekend told me that, USA Today and some other big national publications were there earlier in the week, wanting to get sound bites and interviews with Eubanks. So I think even though he didn't make it to the finals or the semis, I still think it was an impressive run for him to back up his Wimbledon performance, with the added pressure of a home crowd. He had a really good win over Nakashima in the second round. So I think it was still, a good result for him. Now he's inside the top 30 and probably the best story of American tennis so far in 2023, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would totally second that as well. Just given, of course, the story that he takes you on, and what a good analyst he is as well of the game, and how he's been so open about that, helping him obviously on the court, finding solutions, and yeah, he's got an exhilarating game to watch as well, with a much improved one-handed backhand, and that's been fun to see. Obviously on the courts, tactically, how he's able to adjust sort of mid-match.
Yeah, I think there's something too to be said about players like Eubanks and Vukic, who are have been on the rising the ranks of the challenger circuit for several years and are kind of having a mid career surge. I think just from a storytelling perspective, it's easy to gravitate towards that journey as a fan, knowing that all the ups and downs that they've gone through, just grinding away on the challenger tour, and finally to have that big moment that is life changing from a prize money and financial standpoint, but also just getting into the top 100, top 50, now top 30 for Eubanks. So those kind of stories are just easy to latch on to for tennis fans and really the average sports fan.
Yeah, for sure. I noticed, obviously it was getting a lot of buzz, at Wimbledon, on Sports Center, and CNN was doing a full, 5 minutes on Eubanks, and, he was getting these kind of perks and interviews. And yeah, it's great to see. I'm sure it even rocked his world a little bit. And yeah, it'll be really fun to see, obviously, how Vukic and Eubanks do throughout the rest of the US Open series, because it's definitely a couple of names to keep an eye on. And you probably don't want to face them if you're one of the seeded players early in the
Yeah, no,
early in the
definitely not.
tournaments, for sure. But
It's always interesting to see which
Um,
players like Eubanks sort of transcend tennis media too. Like he's, like you said, he's been all over ESPN and all, big mainstream national news. So it's great. I think it's great for tennis to have more stars like that are making headlines outside of the tennis media.
yeah, for sure. And then of course, the doubles we had, Jackson Boudreau and Nick Nathaniel Lamont continue their run, obviously, and they won Newport as well. And so yeah, it was. Do you have any particular thoughts on them as a doubles pairing, and just kind of this whole 2 week stretch? You can include Newport as well.
Yeah, even going back to Wimbledon, they made their first quarterfinal together as a team, and they've really been so consistent all year. They're not a doubles team that has had one big result at a Grand Slam and has sort of floated on those major points throughout the year, but they've had a really steady rise, and they've actually have now won 11 of their last 12 matches, dating back to the quarterfinals at Wimbledon. They won at Newport, like you said, and then they with the win here in Atlanta. A lot of those have been in match tiebreakers too, so I think they've really found their confidence in their groove, and they seem to just really gel well as a team. And you see a lot of doubles players on the circuit who are more are switching partners every week and trying to just find partners to play with who have the best ranking that can get them into tournaments. But they really seem to have a team first mentality, and we got to have a few words with them after a few of their matches this past weekend, and just I don't know, I feel like just good energy from their team, and they seem like they're really confident and ready to climb even higher than they are.
Yeah, for sure. And they beat a very good doubles team, of course, in the final with Max Purcell and Jordan Thompson, and accomplished in singles as well. So I was impressed to see that didn't go to a match tiebreak, and they won that in straight sets, albeit 2 tiebreaks.
Yeah, same. Purcell and Thompson are so incredibly talented. Just it was a really fun match to watch. I mean, serving bombs both teams were, but just some of the shots that the Aussie guys came up with throughout the match were incredible. But I think you could just tell who the doubles team was on the court at the end of the day, and who while Purcell and Thompson are both very accomplished doubles players, obviously, it was easy to see which team was more of a unit and which team was out there probably just more having fun, a nice brain break away from singles.
Yeah, for sure. We actually have a question in the comments asking about Fritz going into the U.S. Open, and of course, I think this win at Atlanta could do wonders for him, of course, because the last 4 majors that he's played have been pretty disappointing. I would say, just especially, I guess you can excuse maybe Roland Garros because he played Cerundolo, who is a top 20 player and quite formidable on clay in his own right, but the losses to Popyrin and as well to the most shocking was Tracy Austin's son and Brendan Holt in the first round of the U.S. Open. So, I think like you were saying, as a top 10 player, anything less than winning the title would have been disappointing here. But I thought he did well with the pressure on his back. To beat, his draw wasn't so simple. Of course, he played Wu Yibing, who beat him in Dallas earlier this year. So that's always going to be a tricky first round. He got through that, and then sort of increased his level against Kei Nishikori, who's been on a good comeback himself, having won a challenger, and yeah, and then in the final he won the semis against JJ Wolf as well, 3-5. But in the final, of course, he had to deal with the disappointment of not closing out the second set, letting those 2 match points go, and then loses the tiebreak and doesn't break in the first game, and he has love 40, and things could have really turned south there, but he hung on, and he played some terrific tennis to get the decisive break, and he was able to deal with that pressure. So I guess the next thing is he's got to make sure he's peaking for the U.S. Open, I would say, because last year he had a good run in Cincinnati, but he wasn't able to sort of carry that on, and that was a very weird uh, result to lose to Holt in the first round there, because that was at the same time you had Tsitsipas losing, and you had this whole Serena show going on, and there was not a lot of eyes, I would say, on those two upsets at the time, just because of the timing of it. But I think Taylor will be expecting a lot of himself at the U.S. Open, and he's such a professional guy. Of course, he plays almost every week, and I think this was his 18th event this year
Wow.
itself. So he schedules himself quite intensely for a top 10 player, and you know we'll see. I guess. But do you have any other thoughts on Fritz?
Yeah, I think you made a great point about just it's probably all going to depend, when he peaks. Like you said, he plays a very busy schedule. So I know he's the top seed this week in DC, and I imagine, he'll play Cincinnati and Canada.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Part of me thinks, last year, given his disappointing loss to Brandon Holt in the first round, is that going to alleviate a little bit of pressure, just not having any big ranking points to defend, or just knowing that you know, he can't, he can't go any lower than losing the first round this year. So maybe
Yeah.
that'll alleviate a little bit of pressure. But I know his slam track record the past, this year and dating back to last year hasn't been great. So I'm sure that, the other side of that is maybe it's the pressure is continuing to build with each of these disappointing early major losses. So it'll be interesting to see, especially what kind of draw he gets, knowing that there's a lot of unseeded floaters, hanging out outside the top 32. So I think his draw will be very, interesting to see where he lands.
Yeah, that's a great point actually about the maybe the pressure alleviating just because he can only go higher from there. Um, but as far as Atlanta is concerned, is there kind of anything? How would you say, like, kind of bigger picture of the tournament as a whole, and the weather, was it really humid? That's what it
Yeah,
looked like on
the day
TV for
sessions
sure.
are pretty tough unless you're, if you're not one of the fans in the shaded VIP section, then you're getting beat down by the sun, pretty straight on for several hours. So, kudos to all of the fans who brave through some of the day sessions, because it's really hot. But they get a solid turnout for the night sessions every night. It seems like it. Atlanta's such a huge tennis community, and they've got so many great partnerships, and it's really a tennis mecca in the Southeast. So I think the tournament is very well run, and they just have a very loyal following. Just, the day sessions can be a challenge, but it's in a great location in Atlanta, and there's all, it's in Atlantic Station, so there's a ton of shops and restaurants, and I think it's very fan friendly. It's all, walkable. So that aspect of it, just the entire entertainment experience for the fans, I think brings a lot of value. And they had a strong field too. I think there were some notable absences this year without, Fritz or Tommy Paul, just in terms of some of the, or Korda, some of the top Americans, but they had, Fritz, Shelton, Eubanks, JJ Wolf, several other American, John Isner. That was probably honestly a big surprise, seeing Isner go out early, just given his track record in Atlanta over the years, winning it 6 times and making the final 3 times. So I would say, even, given Isner's lack of form these past few months, seeing him go out in his favorite tournament first round was one of the biggest surprises of the tournament.
Yeah, that's certainly the takeaway I had as well, because Isner's won this thing 6 times, like you said, and he's kind of been carrying the flag for American tennis for over a decade, and he's 30 now. So I'm actually very interested to see his results, Washington and all the way through Winston-Salem, because this is sort of his time of the year where he usually puts together a big run, or goes pretty deep, and is kind of able to sustain himself really in, usually in the top 20 in the last 10 years. But this feels like, this year or next year could potentially be it for John. But it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I would be surprised if we get an announcement, either before or post the U.S. Open, just based on, like, to me, he's got to be thinking, like, if I, can't replicate or can't do this in Atlanta, where else can I, find this level again? But hopefully I'm wrong. It'd be great to see him on tour, another year or two. But I have a feeling we might get an announcement from him over the next month or two around the U.S. Open.
Yeah, it certainly seems to be heading that way for sure. But yeah, I think we did a good job actually covering Atlanta in a
I'll say
succinct but detailed
yeah,
way, I would say.
one more comment on Atlanta too, and I tweeted about this, but it definitely seems like it has the reputation of being like the American / Aussie Open. If you look at all the past champions,
Mm.
everyone who's won the tournament in its history has either been an American or an Aussie. And this year, yesterday felt like an Aussie US Davis Cup match, because the singles and doubles finals were both US versus Australia. So it's interesting how this tournament consistently, has a very heavy American and Australian field over the years.
Yeah, that is quite interesting. I've noticed that it kind of carries over from the week before Newport a lot of the times,
Mhm.
and with Jordan Thompson and sometimes Kokonakis, and that sort of continued. And you had Diminor, who's won this thing twice as well, and I thought maybe he was another one who was going to go deep, and he played Kokonakis early, and then of course had a pretty good match against Humbert. It was nice to see Humbert finally get to the semis of a tour event. He's one of those players that has a really good record against the top 10 players, and he's won all three of the finals that he was in. So I was kind of curious to see what would have happened if he had won that really close match against Vukic in the semis and taken on Fritz. I think that would have been interesting. But Humbert can definitely build on this because he's had some success this year at the challenger level, winning a couple of titles, and he's very capable on the faster surfaces.
Yeah, totally. He had a great run, and I agree. I think he could have been a difficult matchup for Fritz in the finals. And going back to the American Aussie point, Max Purcell, I asked him this in one of the post match interviews, and he alluded to the same thing you just said about Newport. The most of the Aussie guys prefer to keep the grass swing going and go straight from Wimbledon to Newport rather than stay in Europe and play on the clay like a lot of the Europeans do. So I think that's also a big reason why we see a lot of Americans and Aussies in Atlanta, and they're also more adapted to the humid conditions probably than some of the European players, I would suspect.
Yeah, for sure. That that is definitely interesting. And I know you also posted on Twitter something about the doubles players acknowledging Greg Sharko because he's obviously been a long time prominent member of the ATP. So is there like any sort of info on when's his last event, or is that
Yeah, I think
confirmed?
I think that was Atlanta was his last event. I don't know, like if he's officially retiring from the ATP or just like not working at on site at tournaments as much anymore. Or what his I got the impression that he was maybe stepping down at least from the tournament capacity. But they had a really nice on court ceremony for him. I wish I would have gotten the whole video, but Peter, the
Mm.
tournament director, said some really nice words about Greg, and then I thought it was really nice of Jackson Withrow and Nate Lamons to also include some nice remarks about Greg Sharko in their trophy acceptance speech too. I think it's always it means a lot when it comes directly from some of the players too, because I think some players do a great job at acknowledging the staff behind the scenes who make everything possible, and then other players probably are more dismissive. So it was cool to see them see Greg Sharko get some recognition from the players.
Yeah, for sure. He was very helpful to me actually back in 2021 in getting a credential for the San Diego Open. So very grateful to him for that.
Yeah, it's always a good friend to have for sure. And he was great to work with this past week in Atlanta as well. And I've always heard a lot of great things about him. So he seems like quite the legend in the ATP media world.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I guess are we discussing the other ATP events from this week? I guess we could. um, I guess we could start with Hamburg, of course. An ATP 500, and it was won in the end by Alexander Zverev, who was back inside the top 10 in the race, and this was his 20th title. But for me, I think the most interesting storyline of this whole week was watching Arthur Fils because he's the youngest player now in the top 50, and he had that magnificent win over Casper Ruud and played just some spellbinding tennis at times, and it was just nice to see another sort of young blood in this kind of Runa Alcaraz Sinner generation, and he's got some real talent and firepower, and yeah, that run is what I'll kind of remember this tournament for actually.
Yeah, to get a bagel over Casper Ruud at one of his ATP 250 events that he swept all of them last year, I believe. So I wasn't since I was in Atlanta, I wasn't following a lot of the clay events as closely, but I did see a lot of people tweeting about that result and just how much of a talented prospect he is. So definitely a name to watch on the ATP coming up.
Yeah, for sure. He has a really, really explosive game, especially on the forehand, and I would say that's his best shot. But I've heard people say he has quite a bit of uh, Sangha and Monfils kind of influence in his game with athleticism combined with the explosive power, and loves to finish at the net as well, and has good hands and big first serve. So he's got quite a good package that I think as he's on the come up. He's already won a title this year, and to hit, like you said, 35. I mean, to hit 35 winners in 16 games against Casper Ruud on clay, one of the best clay quarters. 25 of them coming off the forehand. It was truly
Wow,
something, for sure.
that is impressive. How
Uh,
old is he? Did you say that?
yeah, he just turned 19 in June.
Okay, wow, really impressive.
So,
I'm hope I'll be at the U.S. Open, so hopefully I get to see him at some point there.
yeah, I'm excited to see him kind of off the clay as well, and he's someone who the crowds really respond to, and um, yeah, he definitely gets people behind him for sure. But also it was great to see Laszlo Gera, uh, play some really good clay court tennis again and get to another final. He's kind of one of those names that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, but I remember his run quite well in Rio. When he beat Team there and he beat Felix in the final, and that was kind of a breakthrough moment for him because he had also just lost his parents the month before, and unfortunately both of his parents, and so he attributed the trophy to them, and that's kind of what I remember Laszlo Gera for. And he's had some good wins in the last 4 years along the way as well. But I thought to get to the final here and just show again that he's one of the great clay court players, even at the 500 level, was impressive in its own right. As Srihari is with us. Hello, Srihari. I think you're on mute.
Right. Yeah, not sure if I want to particularly do what the comments stating here, but right. Yeah, you were talking about Laszlo Djere, right? I think he lost one of his parents before Rio, and then the other one a bit before that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually pretty sad. But then, uh, yeah, can't believe that was like what 4 years ago already, more than 4 years ago. Um, but yeah, well, what's that? Comment for you.
Hey guys, I'm gonna drop off,
Right.
but it was fun chatting Atlanta.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for
Hope you
joining.
take
It was
it from
nice
here.
having you here.
Yeah, great to
Have a good
have you,
one.
Handon, and of course, yeah, we love all your insights, especially for the doubles. So keep up the great work for the tennis tribe and doubles on the podcast. And yeah,
Yeah, appreciate it.
and where
Likewise.
can listeners follow you on Twitter if you want to drop your handle?
Yeah, I'll drop it in there. It's just Hanlon Walsh, HANLON Walsh, and then thetennistribe.com. But yeah, I hope to see you guys around maybe later this summer at the US Open or another tournament. But have
Yeah,
a good one.
sounds good. I'll actually be up in
Yeah.
in Cincinnati, and so I don't know if you'll be there, but if you are, would love to come and
Yeah.
meet in
I'll
person.
message you about travel schedules. But thanks again, and see you guys soon.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, and see you soon. Yeah.
Sure, enjoyed it.
Yep. So yeah.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Nice to have Handlin
Another
on.
comment from Ghosty right here. This is exactly what I was mentioning to John before. I mean, it was this morning when he asked if I could do the show, and I told him this would probably be the hardest task for me on the show so far, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, you guys spoke about Atlanta. Wait, Handel was talking about a ceremony. Was it for John Isner? I wasn't really paying
No.
attention.
So he was talking about Greg Sharko, who's one of the ATP
Oh.
media guys, and he helps. He's part of the
Ah,
tournament staff.
yeah,
Helps
sure.
people.
Yeah. I
Helps
used to see
everything
those
behind the scenes. So he's
pieces like Charco's analyses and all of that.
yeah. He's a really good stats guy also, and he does
Hmm.
a lot of good like player profile stuff for the ATP. So he's been with them for like 30 plus years, and so yeah, I think this is he's leaving the ATP now. I think this was his last event, so that's what the ceremony was for.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess
Right.
just so we can address the Zverev stuff, I think the main reason I think that a lot of people are uncomfortable, of course, with talking about Zverev so much is because we have the second allegations of domestic violence this time by another ex-girlfriend, the mother of his child. So I think that news has just made a lot of people understandably uncomfortable in terms of watching his matches, analyzing his game, um, and then seeing that he sort of wins a title again right on the heels of that, uh, and so I think that makes people, yeah, understandably quite uncomfortable. And there's no clear domestic violence policy right now in tennis or for the ATP, and so yeah, this is
Yeah,
definitely something the ATP has been
yeah,
dealing with for
that's
the last
pretty
almost three
much
years.
why it's like you mentioned. It was always uncomfortable for the last more better part of the last couple of years, even more so now. With the second allegation, it's pretty fresh. It's been barely a week or two since it broke out, and it's just that we read about it, hear about it, and then there's nothing spoken about it since. Not by media, not by commentators. Um, so yeah, like you mentioned,
Yeah,
that alone, I mean, it just adds to why we just squirm so much just to mention him. I mean, on a platform like this, of course. Um, but yeah, I guess we could
yeah. I will
still.
say, I commented for his match with Jack against Feast, and obviously
Mhm.
he played really well. He had a very good week. He beat a bunch of, I would say we still don't know how he does against the very best players, because he's on an 8-9 match losing streak against the top 10, and so far his best win this year by ranking is against Tiafo in the third
Yeah.
round of Roland Garros, and I don't think he's played any other top 25 player in his 33 wins so far this year. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, I mean, I guess just the level that I saw, he was hitting his backhand really well. He was, you know, almost like a wall from the baseline, and that made it really hard for his opponents in the semis. And but then
Mhm.
also the final against Gera, who was having to use quite a lot of variety and touch, and just having to do things to get by Zverev because he's so lengthy, and he, shrinks the court with how well he moves and stuff. And that was certainly something Feast had to deal with too. So I think it's just that he's rounding back into form, and he's probably a contender again for qualifying for the ATP finals. He's 10th in the race, and so yeah, and I guess this is 13 months following that injury, and he's just been kind of building on that. But again, like I'm unless I see him kind of beat one of Medvedev, Alcaraz, Djokovic, or pretty much anyone in the top 10, I think that's when we'll really see, because he still has some issues with nerves, second serve and the forehand, kind of the two weaknesses you could maybe point to. But he did a good job like managing them this week, and I think yeah, also the matches being indoors in the semis final, it really helped his serve, and also his first serve percentage was through the roof, which made it really hard for opponents to break him. Um, but but yeah, I mean that's kind of where we're at with Zverev. If there's anything else you wanted to add, or before we move on.
Yeah. Nothing much more really. I mean, especially when you mentioned uh, how it could be a bit of an illusion, just because just one of his wins was against top 25 opposition. It was against Tiafoe at RG, who I think previously hadn't even made it that far at the tournament. But yeah, that being said, uh, there are again a lot of players. If he is sort of inching his way back to the top 10, he is number 9 in the race. But
Yeah,
I would say majority of the
I
players are
think
pretty
10th now,
comfortable
because actually
playing.
Fritz needed to win Atlanta yesterday, and he did
Oh
that. So
right,
now
yeah. So
he's now he's 10th.
he's
But
number 10,
but
right?
yeah, I mean there's
Again,
not much.
Fritz
Yeah,
is another guy I think has beaten him thrice already. Medvedev probably beaten him the most from out of anybody. I think he's beaten him the
yeah,
most, 9 times, followed by I think Novak and Rafa. Tsitsipas beaten him 8 times. Novak and Rafa beaten him 7 times. So yeah, there are a lot of players who have his number, especially in the top 10. I think there Alcaraz is another player who outside of that RG quarterfinal, which I mean, to be fair, was a significant match. But other than that, uh, yeah, he's another player who has had some pretty demolition wins against Zverev. So we do think about that as well when we're talking about, okay, Zverev is slowly coming back. He's number 10 in the race. He's in contention now for a spot in Turin. He doesn't have any points to defend for the rest of the season as well. So that maybe in terms of pressure that would help. and sort of alleviating a lot of the pressure that he would otherwise have. But yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up perfectly. He has done well during this part of the season. Historically, I think he's won Canada, Cincinnati, made he's made the final or better at all of the big events during this stretch of the season. So
Yeah.
safe to say that he has enjoyed some success in the past. But yeah, the whether or not his nerves would hold up well, whether or not his game comes together as he would like, against some of the best players in the world, so it still remains still a question that should be answered.
Yeah, for sure. Some other matchups, as far as Hamburg is concerned, of course, you also had Xijin Zhang, who was a good story. He got to the semis as well. Chinese player on the rise along with Wu Yibing.
Yep.
And he obviously he took out Altmaier, and he got to the semis, and that was good to see, because he also had some good ATP success in Madrid this year before losing to Karatsev in that quarterfinal.
Yeah,
And
he beat
I mean, yeah.
he beat Fritz, and before that he had some pretty big wins, didn't he?
Yeah, Fritz and Nori, I think, the round before that. And all those matches were in third set tiebreaks. I think Shapovalov
Yeah.
before that too. So he's
Shapovalov
definitely
as
capable.
well. Yeah.
On the
yeah, he had a really great run there in Madrid, and of course here again in Hamburg all the way to the semis. Yeah, that was another story. Artur Fies, of course, I think we sort of glossed over his exploits here in Hamburg. That was Ewan Hanlon, of course, but another player to watch out for, because we always ask the overarching question: who are those players who Alcaraz will have a tough time against? Maybe, hopefully, there is another one in the mix, along with the biggest one at the moment is Yannick Sinner. So yeah, well, he's definitely making that climb. Now the seeding situation for US Open is going to be a lot more interesting. With you have Wawrinka, you have Fies, both of them Wawrinka getting back to top 50. Arthur Fies also cracking the top 50. Now he's the youngest player in the top 50, followed by Carlos Alcaraz himself. So yeah, and you have Eubanks, of course, who is up to I think 29 now, after the quarterfinal run in Atlanta. So
I think he's
do have a
likely
lot
going
of
to be
players
seeded for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, it's gonna make it a lot more. If not, I mean, even if you have some of these players unseeded, that's pretty dangerous for anyone who's gonna play them, because there is a chance one of the top seeds, plays some of the top seeds also will play against these guys, and they wouldn't want that at all. In the first or second round of the U.S. Open. Now we
Ghosty
also, I
talking
think,
about Wu
Umag
Yibing
had a lot of
and his sense of
interesting
humor.
stories as well.
I will mention something. I will mention a couple more things about Hamburg before we move on.
Sure.
Obviously, Rublev, of course, the number 2 seed here, and I think a lot of people were expecting maybe we'd have a rematch, of course, with a few names that could challenge them. We could have a rematch of Bastad, but Rublev just kind of ran out of gas and ran into Altmaier, who plays these type of players really well, like Sinner and Rublev, and he has wins against both of them. And I think he just really likes players who give him rhythm and linear ball striking, and he was able to he has tremendous power on his one-hander, and he's another player who's the forehand can be kind of a hit or miss, but on clay, with his physicality and his his heavy spin on both wings, he's also somebody who is unseated a lot of the times and is just like a nightmare for top players to face. So he kind of did that, and then we also learned that Musetti continues to have a Laszlo Gera problem, because he's now 2-6 in that head-to-head, and he's lost all 5 of their matches on clay as well.
Bizarre. I mean, that and the Nishioka Evans. Where do you get these head-to-heads from? Like,
I think with Gera, it makes sense, just because Gera is so solid and he has really heavy spin, and he can push Musetti on the one hander.
Yeah, he also absorbs what he gets from Musetti pretty well.
Yes, he does, and I think the forehand is a big weapon, because he's able to win forehand to forehand exchanges against Musetti, and he's also just able to pepper the backhand in ways that when he has a lot more time, especially with the heavy spin. And he can flatten it out really, really well. And he was serving so well this whole week, Jera, and he actually played a very good final too. But it's just, yeah, he ran into someone with a lot more confidence and experience in the end. But
Just give me a sec, I'll be back.
yeah, let's see. Yeah, Elena mentions that he started passively and he got broken.
It was too dark.
Yeah. Yeah, Musetti really lost it. Actually, he played a very close first set, and then he let his frustration out with a racket smash, and then he kind of, his intensity dipped at the start of the second, and I thought that was the difference there. But yeah, I think another kind of good feel good story for many people was seeing Wawrinka back in another ATP final, just because of obviously the hardship that he's gone through with injuries, 2 knee surgeries and 2 foot surgeries, and he's 38 years old, and this is very likely the final year, I would say, for Stan. And so I think he was obviously quite emotional afterwards when he lost that final against Popyrin, because he won the first set and he had a break point at this in the middle part of the third set, and but Popyrin was extremely clutch. Served really well all week, and his like Ghosty is saying, probably Stan's last shot at the title. I mean, that's what you have to think, probably realistically. He at one point, I think, had won 11 straight finals in a row between 2014 and 2016, or actually right from 2013. And then it kind of all started to go downhill for him in finals after the US Open. I think he's now lost 6 of his last 7, but in fairness, he also hadn't made one in over 3 years. His last one was against Andy Murray in Antwerp.
Yeah.
In
Also
2019.
where he won the first set. And
But yeah,
lost
he is still capable of playing really good tennis on a given day. He doesn't move as well as he nearly does, but the ball striking is still very much evident, of course. He can hit shots from 10, 12 feet behind the baseline on his backhand that pretty much no other player can really do, because he's so strong. But with the exception of maybe
you do think it's his final year on tour? I think he has maybe a couple of years more if he doesn't manage to get injured. He looks good enough.
Yeah, if he stays really injury free. But it's just that I remember reading this Player Tribune article from him, I think last year, around Wimbledon time, and that was when he first came back from those surgeries, and he was saying that he wants to kind of leave he doesn't want to be at a point where he's like just completely broken when he's retired and he can't do anything else. But I think actually, yeah, it will be interesting. It's just we never know, because he's like 38, and it's just that we don't know if he'll ever win another title or get himself back in the final for that at that point. But yes, not quite 12, but you're not that far off. Kidding. Let's see. What else from Umag, obviously. Yeah, I mean, I was surprised to see Popyrin in the final. I didn't know that he was gonna get to the final on clay as well. He was 11 and 16 on clay coming into this week, and he hadn't really had any great results on the clay. Popyrin. He'd won a title before and he'd beaten Fritz at the start of the year, but he's always someone I wonder who's like, why is he not more high ranked? Because when you watch him play, and he just the way he's able, it's not just the power. Like, he has a very complete game, and he's extremely aggressive, and he moves very well, and he has a good touch as well, and he volleys well, and it's just he has quite a package that you would think would translate to more consistency, but he just hasn't really happened for him. So this was a really good week, but I don't know, like, kind of week to week how his career will pan out. But he's just another one in the mix, I think. Let's see. Let's look at more of these comments. Srihari is out of the picture right now, but I'm guessing he'll come back. His internet always tends to waver. I'm just going to look at these comments. Yeah. Some good stuff going on in the comments. Sorry, I think Srihari is coming back. Yeah, he's back. Okay.
Yeah. Again, internet was acting up, and I just know that Ghosty is a joke. Okay, not the one I thought he would have, but anyway. Let me just pull up that graphic that I lost. Um, but yeah, you were talking about Popyrin,
Yeah.
and I was a little surprised to what do you call it? Hear that win loss record of his on clay. Especially, I mean, I remember he played Nadal at RG. What was it, a couple of years ago? Remember he
Yeah,
almost
I
took a
do
set.
remember that. Yeah, he
Yeah,
had an easy overhead on top of the net, and
easy overhead and
it was
one
giving him
forehand.
a
He just hit it way beyond the tram lines, and then from there he just lost the set. But yeah, and I think he beat Sinner also in Madrid that same year
yeah,
before losing to Nadal again. Um,
correct.
but yeah, so this is his game is one that should translate to all of the surfaces, like you mentioned, pretty complete. He can generate power. He's good at the net. Great serve also. It's just I don't know. There's always some reason as to why players just like the way he plays, they are not extremely successful, if you will, on tour. Popyrin,
Yeah,
you
I
had
guess what
for
I
a
would say
while
is that
Kevin
he's a
Anderson.
player who needs some rhythm and matches earlier on in the week, and he also just has his game can sometimes be low margin because he's so hyper aggressive,
Yeah.
and maybe that lends itself to some more inconsistencies, and maybe he just like a lot of his losses this year have been close matches that just haven't gone his way. I know he went on a run in Rome as well, and
Hmm.
he beat Felix and Safiulin and O'Connell there before running out of steam against Runa in a tight three setter. But
Yep.
he's always someone who has like the potential, and then it's just like, can he back it up? Like I remember he beat Fritz. He played a really good match in Australia. Beat him in 5 sets. Had the home crowd behind him, but then he was kind of very flat against Shelton in the next round.
Yeah.
And that was one where I thought he would at least make that match a little tighter. I was surprised that it was straight sets for Shelton in that third round, but he was, obviously Shelton got to the quarters there, and he's another talented player who just hasn't found his way since Australia. But uh,
Yeah.
I'm trying to see also, yeah, Arnaldi went on a run here in Umag, got to the semis, had a really good win over the Hechka in the quarters, and then he and Popyrin played a really physical match. So I actually thought once Stan won that first set in a tiebreak after being down a
Hmm.
break, I actually thought, this is advantage Stan. He's up a set. He's been here many times. He had the least, he is 38, but he didn't have a very physical route to get to the final. He won all of his matches in straight sets. And so I
Yeah.
was impressed by Popyrin's mentality to just hang in there and just play, just absolutely blast shots from behind the baseline basically, and push Wawrinka around and really just bully him the last 2 sets. It was just Wawrinka's a couple of court smarts, a couple of good touch shots that got him the break back in the second set, and then he managed to get it to 4-all. But it felt like Popyrin was the better player, really the whole match.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but yeah, it's just it was
Right.
one of those tournaments where
Yeah, we look at these movers here of the week.
yeah,
So for fees, I mean, again, it's a little difficult, especially for players from Umag and Hamburg, for us to talk about the U.S. Open prospects just because of the surface.
mm,
But nonetheless, um, yeah, well, we spoke about Atlanta, of course, Fritz winning, and I don't know if you spoke about Nishikori, and then his sort of.
yeah. We talked about him. He picked up a one ATP win over Jordan Thompson in a couple tie breaks. That
Mhm.
was that was his like return to the ATP tour, I guess. He'd already won a challenger before, and he got a
Yeah.
few other matches in. He had lost to Mickelson in another challenger, but yeah, it's just he seemed totally healthy. The only concern for him is that he seemed totally healthy in his first match, but then his knee was heavily taped in his quarterfinal against Fritz, and then he played a tight first set with Fritz, but then he just couldn't move the same way. He was getting treatment on it, and it's just I just hope this is not another injury thing
Yeah.
because he's been just troubled by injuries really since 2016, where
Yeah.
he
That's true. That's unfortunate
yeah
because Even 2017, he was in the top 10 until there was that match against Monfils in Montreal. It was crazy match
Yeah,
point
that was his
saves.
last match that season.
Yeah, it was the last
Where he
match,
had all
and
those
like
match
pretty much
points.
half of the top 10 in 2017 pulled the plug. Just like
Yeah,
for the U.S. Open. And
2016,
then
2017 is where we lost. A lot of these top guys from injuries. It
yeah,
was
and then his comeback in 2018 was just overshadowed by the fact that Djokovic also made a huge comeback from like outside the top 20, winning a couple of slams, getting back to number one. But like, there's also something was not really talked about too much because what he made as quarters and semis in Wimbledon. He was also making it deep in the Masters events, Monte Carlo final, and he made it back to the top eight. And he played the ATP finals, and it
yeah,
went over to the next year as well, where he made three consecutive quarterfinals at slams. Um, so
yeah,
yeah, like it. He was, when he is healthy, he can do pretty well, and he's had really good results. I think yeah, even Barcelona in 2019 made the semis, and so many results like that. So yeah, like he is an elite player. Even I want to say 21 when he gave Djokovic kind of a stern test in the was it the third round? Yeah, the third round of the U.S.
yeah.
Open, and again he played. Um, I think he lost to Zverev maybe thrice in the clay season with Madrid, Rome, and
Right,
RG.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. He did manage to get
And
himself like firmly back in the top 50, and he was like
yeah,
semifinals of DC. He was like, yeah, he was starting to put together some good results. Third round of the U.S. Open.
yeah, and then he
The
got injured again. I think he made the quarters of the Olympics as well. I think he lost to Novak
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Um,
he seems to like when he comes back, he seems to be in good form. He doesn't actually take
yeah,
that
he
long
doesn't lose. I mean, we've seen
to come
Dominic
back.
Thiem how he's like been struggling the last
Yeah.
more than last year. Just like
Oof.
get a few
It's
wins.
really brutal right now for team. I mean, I thought at the end
Yeah,
of October, honestly, when he started having those good results in that stretch, like he beat Hurkacz indoors, which is not easy, and he pushed Korda, he beat some other good names, even in the clay court season
he beat
after
Tommy Paul.
Wimbledon.
Yeah,
And he played Carreño Busta very tight in the US Open. So I thought like, okay, he'll take the rest of this year off and then he can build on it. But his year has been disaster so far, like in
yeah,
2023. Like I mean, all
yeah.
we really have is basically two matches against Tsitsipas that we're just clinging on to as like hope. But
Yeah,
it's
if you
really,
wanna
really
go, if you wanna
disheartening,
go a bit far, maybe that 5 setter against Pedro Cachin. Uh,
maybe. But like, I mean, these are matches in
yeah,
his
that's true. I
best that he
mean,
was
we don't
just
want to mince words here because like
doing.
this is
Yeah,
it's just not looking good. Like I mean, I know we know that he had a pretty threatening injury in 21, but it's just been long enough for him to get something going. Really, he's
yeah.
had a few semis at 250 level, but no
And I do have to say, like the right
wins.
wrist is so brutal because I mean, like without his forehand, like that was the shot that made him
Yeah,
so great. So
yeah, I mean
for him to
he's
not
not had a
trust
big
that wing,
win. I mean he's not had a win at a big tournament. I mean he's had one at Rome that was this year in the last couple of
mm,
years. Did he win a match in Rome or Monte Carlo? Sorry, it was Monte Carlo and
yeah,
he made it. I think he beat Gasquet, lost to Holger.
yeah,
Other than that, he's not won a match at big event. First round, all of these slams. I mean, yeah, sure, okay, you got Rublev. We expected that to be tight. No. Then of course the Wimbledon loss and
yeah.
yeah,
He's yet to have
Umag
that like
again. He
really
could
really
have
big
done
win.
better. Like against Lehechka, he had that break in the second set. Yeah,
Yeah,
these there's certain. I mean, he is losing matches in one match. When he loses, it's almost like he loses in one manner.
yeah,
Last year, he was losing straight sets for most part, and then he started losing. Okay, in third set tiebreakers or like in three sets.
yeah.
And then this
I
year,
think it,
kind of
it is it is a little disheartening because it is taking him a long, long time, and the problem is, yeah, I do think it's the forehand. Like I watch some of these matches, he can still move really well. He can still hit that backhand really nicely. He still doesn't look like underpowered in any other shot. It's the forehand where he's just not trusting it
yeah.
nearly as much. It's a lot more passive. When he goes for it, it leaks errors. it's just yeah, it's just not the same forehand that it used to be.
Mhm.
So I do wonder, like, just how frustrating it must be, like, because
Yeah.
he's been kind of patient and he's been just going on to the next week, but it's just not been happening for him for over a year. And I mean, he's not even 30 yet, so he's not like old by any stretch, but it's just he's an older 29 than
Yeah.
most, just because he played. I mean, remember those years from 2014 to 2020, he was averaging like 26, 27 tournaments a year. So
Yeah.
even in
Crazy.
the 2020 year when there was the pandemic, I think he played over 30 matches in the pandemic itself. So at some point, I think he had to have been burned out, because he spent a whole decade trying to win a major. He wins that major at 27. Yeah, he has a few other good results that year. Gets to the finals of ATP finals. Has some big wins, but
AO
ever since
final as
like
well.
Australia 2021, it just hasn't been there, because he also had knee injuries, foot injuries, and then he took off a lot of the time, and then he came back in Madrid. He got to the semis there, and then you thought, okay, let's do a complete reset. He lost in the first round of RG, and then he hurts his wrist against Manarino, and it's just been
Yeah.
like downhill since. So
Yeah, and then what kind of annoys me personally is that, yeah, you have all of this, and then we know what it was like for him in his prime. He played a bunch of tournaments. He was losing early in quite a bit, even in his like absolute prime. Remember, he lost to 6-2, 6-1 to Krajinovic before winning the US Open. Who would have had him as, I mean, at that time we were like, okay, if he plays like this, there's no way he's favorite for the US Open. We had Djokovic and Medvedev, Zverev, Tsitsipas, these guys, like at the time, like we could rely on them more than maybe team. But then obviously team had that amazing run. He beat Felix, Diminor, Medvedev, Zverev, on the way to the title, which was great. But yeah, I mean, there is
yeah,
no guarantee that, okay, yeah, well, there are some players from, say, the last couple of years or 3 years, like Federer, Nadal, and team himself, who are missing from the mix. You want to, if you want to put it that way,
I I
and
will just say,
you
like, this
have,
injury is just it is like one of those really delicate ones, because like you always just have that fear in the back of your mind, like when you're hitting the forehand,
yeah,
like what if it comes, like, it's just PTSD. It's one of those
yeah,
type
that's
of
true.
injuries, because it's not even like his left wrist, where at least, okay, you can slice the backhand, and you can still get your way around it, like,
Yeah,
um but it's just, yeah, like when
yeah,
it happens on your dominant arm.
yeah. Speaking of PCB, he just withdrew from
Yes.
Toronto, and there goes
Oh,
his
there goes his
1,000
season,
points.
basically, because he's had this elbow injury thing for like over 6 months, and he's just been like, basically every entry list that I see on Twitter, it's like almost every week he's pulled out. So that's a bit sad, but good for him that he got the Masters 1000 last year. He's what, like
Yeah,
32, 33, 32 maybe.
yeah. I mean, he
So
is a
he's
semi-finalist at the US Open twice, and
yeah, yeah. He is uh,
was
he is a very, very good player on hard courts, contrary to what Nick Kyrgios thinks.
bronze as well.
Uh,
Yeah.
but what else that we should talk about? Oh, I mean, this week we have Washington coming up, so Fritz is the number one seed there. I will
Yeah.
say Washington used to be way more stacked than it is now. I mean, now it's like not nearly as stacked, and it's like Los Cabos actually has more,
Hmm.
has some pretty good depth
Yeah, I mean, we
than
had
it used to be.
Medvedev and then he withdrew. So it's, I think, yeah, without Medvedev, maybe it looks a bit, you can see the void, maybe.
Yeah,
Great
I mean,
player on hard court.
still some pretty good players, and it is like a 48 player draw, so and it's a combined event this year, so I think that would be quite something. Yeah, I was actually just going to mention, yeah, Tsitsipas is playing this week in Los Cabos, and he has Philippus back with him, but they have an interesting arrangement, because he says that he can't have them both, and he doesn't want to listen to more than one voice. So he says that
Yeah, I
I'll
mean, I
have.
don't blame, Mark at all there
So you
with
will not see
Carlos.
Apostolos in his box for Los Cabos and for Canada and for Cincinnati. So uh,
Let's
personally,
see
that
where that goes.
let's see where that goes, because I kind of like that he's only going to have
Yeah, I mean,
Philippus
just
in
purely
his
tennis
corner.
wise, yeah, that was not helping. Um, let's
Uh,
see. I mean, it's just,
and then at the U.S. Open, though, Apostolos will be joining them both.
oh,
But the main thing for Tsitsipas has to be like get a better U.S. Open result, because Tsitsipas at the U.S. Open
Yeah.
has been a bit of an enigma. I guess you could take out, the losses to Chorich, where he basically blew that match. He had so many match points, 5-1 up
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the
That
4-6 match
that
points.
that match
And
bends
then,
all laws of physics already, and that the
yeah,
fact that he
you
didn't
could
win.
say, okay, he had maybe some bad draw luck with getting Alcaraz in the third round in 2021. But again, Alcaraz was not the player that he was in 2022, and he had chances to win that match too. But okay, fine. But just the losses like last year to Gilan and the first round loss in 2019. So he needs to get a better showing there as a top
Yeah.
player, I would say. So
Yeah, I mean, just imagine he has these good results next 3 tournaments, and then Apostolos comes back, and then he loses early again. So
yeah,
I can
because he's
only
done
see that
well in
happen.
Cincinnati and Canada. Like he's been to the
Yeah, he's
finals
finalist at
both.
both tournaments. So
So
yeah, and also he played Washington. I remember he made the semis, lost to Kyrgios 4 years ago. Yeah, I mean, and yeah, even 2021, he made the semis at both tournaments. He has had good results overall. Yeah, so yeah, we'll see. I don't know. It's just a pretty interesting arrangement. I don't think I've ever seen a scenario, or maybe I'm overlooking one, where the main man has not been in Tsitsipas's box. Even when during Moratoglu's days. Um, yeah, you know, just we'll see. But there are some comments I have been keeping an eye on, like this.
yeah,
Uh,
do you want to talk about this? No, okay.
right. And this. Well, yeah, I think my Twitter speaks for itself.
Okay.
So maybe, yeah. But yeah, um, yeah,
Like
funny because I see quite a few. The difference between Novak and Steph here is that Novak drew his boundaries pretty clearly. We saw for a while his parents were not showing up for his matches for a long time. Some monumental Grand Slam finals. But other than that, barely ever seen them. So yeah, I mean, should Tsitsipas do that for his for his good maybe? Because we know that it's not been great when when even one of his parents is in the box. Last year in Turin, everyone remembers him just hitting a ball towards his parents because there's a lot of chatter not helping. Clearly, I mean, there's enough
yeah.
there's enough data to show it's not helping. So yeah, maybe you could do something like that, and starting from now, it's never too late, right? But uh, I mean, aside from the fact that he has like a gazillion matchup issues anyway, so I don't know how much will help, but it could help because there are matches that he shouldn't be losing that he's losing anyway. So there's that.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess the other seeds in Washington, Hurkacz. Um, who else is there? I haven't actually
Yeah,
looked at the draw
Hurkacz
list.
again. Well, he's out of the top 16 right now, so he would want to. Last year, lost what second round, right? U.S. Open has not really had a big
Yeah.
result during the stretch. His biggest one was Harley last year in the Miami semis. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
aside from that,
And Felix is the third seed. Yeah. Felix hasn't been healthy really since the start of Miami, but we'll see if
yeah,
he can get it together because he had a pretty good year last year, and
yeah, he
he's
did.
someone that I definitely
Um,
want to see more often in the mix.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, even
Tiafo, the second
otherwise, like
seed.
the only positive I can see for Felix is that um, yeah, last year, this is when he peaked somewhere around this time, and also his a lot of his matches is like, I mean, yeah, and even this year, only positive was the Indian Wells. Really, other than that, there's no tournament where he looked encouraging.
Yeah.
Um, well,
Yeah, that's
neither
right.
is happening. So you have your answer. Um, uh,
Yeah.
good.
Uh, yeah,
So yeah,
and
that's
then we have one more ATP event this week in Kitzbühel, but I just refer to that really as the Dominic Team Open. Uh,
yeah. Um,
yeah, I just do. I don't know why. Just maybe because it's in Austria, and yeah, he won it once.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, it was 2019, right?
Yeah. I mean, the top
Yeah,
seed there is Echeverry, and the second seed is Hoffman. And I guess it's just more a continuation of like Stad and Umag mostly.
yeah, Umag especially. I mean, what Lehechka
Yeah,
was the top seed,
maybe
and now
maybe
you have Echeverry.
Norris will do something again, win the title and get to a final again, like he tends to do in
Yeah,
these post Wimbledon. He just beat Varias today. I mean, really, I'm just gonna be looking at team. I just want to see if he can string together 2 or 3 good wins. I'll be curious to see about Echeverry also because
yeah. At
he
this
got a
point,
good.
I wanted to win a title really, because like 2 to 3 wins not doing it. He has done that Estoril last year quite a few
Yeah,
times, but it's not led
he's
to
got to get to
anything
the
really.
final at
Umag,
least. I would say for me to
Umag, yeah,
get
we could have
really.
expected that in Umag, honestly speaking, but that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So let's see. I haven't looked at his draw, but no matter what draw he gets, people somehow make it seem like it's a draw from hell for him. Maybe every draw right now is a draw from hell for him unless he gets a big breakthrough. So yeah, we'll see. Um, anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah, those are three. I mean, I guess what Kitzbühel is the last clay event for the year, right?
Yes, that is the last play event for the next 6 months on the ATP
Should have
tour,
been
my
RG, but
understanding.
anyway, we'll let that slide by.
Yeah, that's always
Right.
a talking point, of course. But yeah, I think that's about it. That covers our show for this week. We went pretty much over an hour. It was good to have Handlin on as well, talk about Atlanta
Yes.
since he was on site, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's always good
Srihari
to have someone
last
who
week.
was at the tournament, to speak about these things beyond that go beyond tennis, right?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah. Anyway, that'll be you soon in Cincinnati, soon enough. So yeah,
Yeah,
that would be interesting as well. Anyway, so yeah, it was great doing this with you again. Much like last week, we
yep,
had a pretty detailed, insightful chat, and let's looking forward to the action this week.
yep. Look forward to it too, and we'll be back with more ATP Weekly next week. And yeah, check out Nick's WTA Weekly as well. He'll have you covered for that. But
Right.
yeah, Srihari, I don't know if you want to maybe close us out with your best John Silk
Yes,
impersonation.
yes, yeah. I was just trying to find that, but yeah, I managed to locate it. So yeah, everyone enjoy what is possibly the best way to end the show.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.